Hi, it's Reverend Dr. Nadine Rosechild-Sullivan, and I'm reading to you a memoir from my book, I Trusted You, Fully and Honestly Speaking of Gendered Assault. The trigger warning, this is a story of an abusive lesbian relationship. And it is called Midnight Train Home and begins on page 79. I followed Maureen from Pennsylvania to Indiana, not so much because I was in love as because when I met her, I got to have my first sex ever outside the auditory, authoritative range of parents. She wasn't good looking, but she was persistent, and though she was 30 and I 19, I was willing to give her and a relationship with her a chance. She was from there, and a few months into our relationship, she went home. She invited me to follow, going first and reestablishing her job as a butcher in her father's meat shop and taking an apartment downtown. I never met her family. She wasn't out to them. My first night there was overwhelming. In our first floor unit, our front window was at street level, and the cacophony of pedestrian voices lilting in the local accent sounded as foreign as if I'd gone overseas. I never felt so far from home. But we resumed our sex life with vigor and passion, and alone in our bedroom, we exchanged rings and made promises. I took up housekeeping. She had one cat when I arrived. Soon there were four. I swept and washed and cleaned. I tended the box daily. She got a dog, and I fought the cat fur and dog hair and kept the bed and the couch fur free. I was so fastidious, she called me Felix Unger from The Odd Couple, because the apartment never smelled. She also mocked me as Susie Homemaker. With no real funds, I tried to decorate out of nothing and rounded out our furniture with tables and shelves I trash picked or found at the thrift store and then refinished. And I painted each room. Later, in the bad times, it felt like painting my own mausoleum. And I went job hunting. With my high school diploma and mediocre typing skills, I turned up a series of poorly compensated waitressing jobs that generally paid little more than my bus fare and cigarettes. But I went to work each day and worked hard at getting good at serving. And in my spare time, I tried to write. Meanwhile, Maureen came and went from her real job and paid the rent and the utilities and her car loan. And while we never once went grocery shopping, she brought home cuts of beef wrapped in butcher's paper. Slowly at first, she began to change. It got where, even in a gay-friendly space, when I went to touch her arm or hold her hand, suddenly she'd push me off, barking, "Not here. You do that when I say so, not when you decide." And she took to calling me names. Many made the list, but stupid always seemed to be at the top. If she said it once, she said it 20 times a day. I was stymied. I'd never known anyone who spoke poorly to family or friends. It was so far outside my experience, it simply did not compute, which made me wonder if she were right. And she became jealous. Even though she had taken me along once or twice, she began to insist that she go to the bar alone. She said all the other women were looking at me, and she wouldn't have her friends thinking her lover was a slut. She wouldn't be no fool. So weekend after weekend, she left me home, alone. And she traded in her car, the automatic that I could drive, for a stick shift that I couldn't. I worried that if either one of us needed to go to the ER, I wouldn't be able to drive us there. But it was as if I had spoken. My words went as unmarked as if I were the wind whistling through the trees. And her passion began to dwindle. She went from daily interests to once a week, to twice a month, then to months of nothing. And every Friday and Saturday night, she stayed out later and later. And when she did come in, even though the rest of the week she only showered in the morning, she began showering before coming to bed, or before coming within olfactory distance of me. And she became secretive. In our apartment's floor plan, the middle of our bedroom floor was the path between the living room, kitchen, and bath. She took to screaming if I passed through while she was on the phone, or answered the phone while she was at home. And she took to whispering her calls. Then there was the night she didn't come home at all, not till mid-morning, and the extra long shower she took that day. I didn't know what to do. But by the time I was 20, and this was my first real live-in relationship, there was no one to tell, no one to talk to. I couldn't call home. My parents weren't even sure why I'd changed states or why I'd chosen such an unlikely location. At least, we didn't talk about it. And we didn't talk about the fact that I wasn't dating men. And we didn't talk about the fact the woman they'd met once before I left town looked a lot like a man herself. In fact, they really weren't talking to me much that year at all. They were mad at me for leaving home. That's what my parents did when they were mad. They were angry at me for leaving home, and I was essentially getting the silent treatment. But how, when I was gay, could I live out their vision that I stay home until I married a man? I couldn't talk to my straight friends from high school. They didn't know I liked girls and wouldn't have known what to say or think if they had known. I couldn't talk to the boys I had dated. Each was, in his own way, heartbroken. And I didn't have anyone in the lesbian community. After leaving high school in the suburbs, I hadn't stayed long enough in Philly out in the community to make many friends before leaving town for Maureen. And Maureen hadn't let me make any new connections there in Indiana. I could walk around town, explore the neighborhood, get a cone at the local ice cream shop, stop to hypothesize about ancient astronauts at the New Age bookshop, and get to and from work, but I was, for all intents and purposes, isolated. Oh, and the other waitresses at my job were 30 to 40 years old, married, had kids and husbands who took their paychecks. They had not a clue that my life or orientation was not theirs, and I hadn't a clue how similar our husbands actually were. Making my way each day by foot and by bus to my latest restaurant job, I passed a family services counseling agency. I turned in. They had a sliding scale, so for $2 a session, I saw a psychologist. Looking back, I presume now that he was Freudian. He simply sat at his desk, placed slightly behind me, and wrote as I talked. Never once did he offer an insight or a moment's feedback. He just wrote. I look back now and shudder. At the time, according to the American Psychological Association's DSM-2, homosexuality was classified as a mental illness. After the third session, I decided that for less money, I could buy Deborah a beer. Deborah, an acquaintance of a friend of Maureen's, had left her boyfriend with a basket full of possessions and moved in with Maureen and me to crash on our couch. At least she would give me feedback. I was right. Hers was a good ear. She told me I deserved better treatment. Anyone did. In my second year in Indiana, friends of Maureen's from Philly, Georgianne and Kara, came to visit. They stayed 3 days. Leaving me home again, Maureen took them around town. She took them to the bar without me. While they were out, I cooked beef. When they got back, Maureen called me stupid bitch for burning it. I cleaned up while she took them out for pizza. On the next day of their visit, while Maureen was at work, George and Kara sat me down. We want to talk to you, Kara said. We love Maureen, but clearly you're being abused. We can't take you with us now, but if you can get your own way back to Philly, we have an extra room and straight friends who need daycare. You can use our downstairs to babysit in the daytime and rent our room. I didn't really answer them. I was too humiliated, but I knew they were right. They left, but they left me with a plan. A few days later, my wisdom teeth went bad. The whole 2 years I'd been there, they'd been brewing their abscesses. They were impacted too. The pain was so bad, I thought of shooting myself with a small handgun Maureen kept for our protection. But I had no insurance and no real money, and the oral surgeon wouldn't operate without payment in full first. I called home. Dad wired the money, but he needed it back in 12 weeks for taxes. I had my surgery, recovered, and week after week I took almost every dollar and repaid him. I continued to scrape until I had enough money for my ticket home. Maureen was growing suspicious. My attitude had changed. I started calling her out more on her affair. She would respond in her most forlorn way, I love you. I love her too. I don't know what to do. I can't choose. If you leave me, I'll kill myself. Then add, if you leave, I'll kill you too. One Friday afternoon, she came home as I was talking to the neighbor across the backyard fence. I had been weeding and wrestling a patch of unwanted rhubarb planted by a long since gone tenant. She was empathizing on the possibility of ridding a flower patch of rhubarb roots, on the impossibility. Maureen demanded I get inside that instant. In the bedroom, she wanted to know why I was having an affair with the neighbor. I denied and countered with new accusations about her affair, listing again her obvious behaviors. The air heated up. Suddenly, she balled up her fist and lunged, knocking me on the bed and landed on top of me. Then she was above me, screaming, bitch, alternately pummeling me and ripping at my clothes. She wanted to do it now and to teach me a lesson. I was taller than her, 5'11" to her 5'4", and heavier. I blocked her blows and dumped her sideways, but in an instant she was back, riding my resistance, drawing energy from the struggle. She knocked my glasses off, started her mantra again. I hate you, I hate you, I love you, I can't live without you, I love her, I can't live without her, I love you. If you leave me, I'll kill myself. If you leave me, I'll kill you, I'll kill you. Her voice trailed off. She leapt off and reached under the bed, grabbing the box where she kept the protective revolver. It was in her hand, then suddenly at close range in my face. She was threatening and gesticulating wildly, pistol flailing in every direction, then pointing it at me again, yelling, I'll kill you, you bitch, I'll kill you, then waving it toward her own temple, crying, I'll kill myself, I don't want to live, I'm out of here. I remember thinking, as it pointed away from me, my arms are longer than hers, and reaching out and knocking her arm upward, holding her wrist above her head, pistol pointing toward the ceiling, the floor of the apartment upstairs, until, no longer resolute in her struggle against me, she broke down in shaking sobs, and I was able to slip it from her grasp. I left her pounding the bed and struggling with the pillow while I hid the pistol deep in a kitchen cabinet. Later, after she composed herself and went out, I moved it again, locking it in the glove compartment of a car out back that didn't run, and kept the key on my person at all times. I still didn't have enough for the train, but about 4 weeks later, I hid the key in a green glass vase, and after she went out that Friday night, had the neighbor drive me to the train. On the way, I mailed a letter. It told Maureen where to find her protective pistol and the hiding spot of the key. As I boarded the train and made my way to a seat in the dining car, I shed tears for Shahando, my shepherd collie, and Tommy Tiger, and 9 other cats I'd never see again. They had listened when even Deborah wasn't around, and had often jumped on my lap and nuzzled my face in my darkest moments. When the train crossed out of Ohio, the welcome to Pennsylvania marker never looked so sweet. I wanted to get out and kiss the ground, but the locomotive engineer neither knew nor cared, and Amtrak's Broadway Limited was moving too fast. I waited and kissed the ivy-lined sidewalk of Philadelphia's Pulaski Avenue between Seymour and Manheim Streets in front of George and Kara's lesbian collective / rooming house / my new independent daycare center. Thank you.